Good morning, Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy from Guardian Tax Law. I want to focus on a topic that affects people all the time. We get questions about this on a regular basis. What do you do when someone reports income improperly to the IRS under your Social Security number? So either 1099 income or W-2 information that's reported incorrectly. We have people that the IRS automatically will audit or report, do an underreporting of your tax return, and you get smacked with extra taxes. I mean, this is very easy for the IRS to do. But how do you fight it when it's bad information that the IRS has? Again, this is it's not an easy question, but it's definitely something that we help people with regularly. So stay tuned. We've got a great topic for today. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. Got some interesting news, some good, not so good news. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag today. Um, but want to first of all talk about the banking crisis, what's going on, and how that leads into a lot of other issues. We're going to talk more about the housing market, um, and some other news coming out that's come out recently. So first of all, we're going to share an article about banks. So this has been a big issue. We've had some big failures lately, and banks do fail. It happens. Um, but when it starts to happen in larger numbers or more consistently, that's when, again, people get very nervous. And they should be nervous because it's a really bad sign when we have some of our larger banks um, failing. Now, this is the sad part. U.S. bank profits jump. Why? Is they're shaking off the failed bank costs, the costs in the industry of having it. So sometimes when profits jump, banking is definitely one area where the richest banks um, usually know how to maneuver, how to get through, get the political, excuse me, pardon me, the political support they need to maneuver. But smaller banks can often suffer the cost, which is frustrating. So this is very much into the weeds, and I'm not going to try to torture people too much. Um, but the first quarter profits jumped to 64 billion in 2024, and this is across the entire banking sector. But this is by large banks not shouldering billions in special fees they were directed to pay to recover costs incurred by a bank failure suspect. So they were supposed to pay these fees, um, and they didn't pay it. So they were supposed to have an assessment to address these bank failures. Didn't happen, and so now they're walking away. So it's kind of interesting. It doesn't really explain why they didn't realize the assessment, why they didn't have to pay the special fees they were directed to pay. Um, and so you have a lot higher non-interest income, mainly because again there are some sectors of the economy doing better, um, but their expenses dropped, and here they have like I said, this gets really in there, but you have a deterioration in credit card and commercial real estate portfolios. So while they say, look, they had this one-time boost to their income, it's not so much growth in the economy, it's because they didn't pay certain fees But the thing to watch out for is that you have problems in here. So one of the things that they cite, and this has been cited multiple times, is the commercial real estate portfolios. This is a warning flag out there that's been out there. Many people have cited it. FDIC Chairman Martin Gruenberg just commented about it. They're concerned about it. They're monitoring the situation. And this is what I take away, I would say. So again, temporarily good news, but overall still a lot of problem. They increased their problem bank list from 52 to 63, and the total assets in those banks grew to 82.1 billion. That's only 1.4% of banks, but at the same time, it's something to watch for. And when we have problems in the banking sector, like we've seen in the past, it can have huge impacts in the economy. The 2008 crashes led to a ripple effect through the economy, and a pretty large one. Because what do they affect? Housing. Now, there's a Breitbart article quoting, again, the Fed President Kashkari. And again, he's one president. He's the president of his local Fed. But he makes it so for president for Minneapolis. He makes it important, note here that immigration is keeping inflation high, especially for housing. And it's simple supply and demand. The more people that you have competing for housing, the more expensive it's going to be. It's just a numbers game. And again, you bring in millions and millions of people into the country, they need a place to live. And they're going to typically go for the cheaper housing, the more affordable housing. Years ago, about 10 years ago, we saw the same thing in California. I was living in the Sacramento area at the time, and they had a lot of refugees that they brought in. Good for the refugees. We brought them in, there was a need, but the result was the city, they didn't expand the amount of housing available. They just took them and put them in a lot of the cheapest homes and housing, apartments, etc. And then that drove up the cost for everybody else. Increased the price to rent an apartment or home by roughly $500 to $1,000. So again, drove the price up throughout the entire market. So the rental market went up substantially. And here, because we're doing this nationally, we're letting so many people into the country, it is having a huge effect. So Kashkari, and a lot of people, he's one of the more, I would say, cautious members of the Federal Reserve. And he said he's not ready to cut rates until he sees several months of real progress on inflation. And he's saying the flood of immigrants is hindering that progress. So, and it's just not housing. It's when you have more people chasing the same amount of goods for food, for clothing, all of these products, it makes a difference. When you have millions of people, more people in the economy, it absolutely makes a difference. And so this is the news that most people do not want to hear. And I talked to plenty of people. I've talked to people that said, look, we think interest rates are going to go down. I said that a little bit at the beginning of the year, but the facts aren't bearing that out. They say that they're likely to stay higher for an extended period of time, which is economic pain for most people. So, you have the booming demand for housing, which despite sky high rates, not sky high, for in the last 20, 30 years, very high housing rates. Usually when you have high rates, prices go down. But because we have so much demand, the booming demand is keeping the prices of housing high. It's keeping, interest rates are not cooling down the demand for housing. And part of that is the rental prices are so high, people still are dying to get into a house almost at any cost because it's still cheaper or can be cheaper than renting. Um, so, and this is ironic. So Kashkari's immigration bombshell runs directly contrary to the claims by the Biden administration and its allies that surging immigration is keeping inflation down by depressing wages. That's funny because it is true that immigration, a flood of immigration, a flood of cheap labor, big business loves it more than anybody else because it helps them the most. But the effect throughout the economy is, yes, it depresses wages. And we have wages being depressed at the same time that inflation is very high right now. So it doesn't help your average worker. It makes everything more expensive. And the people that benefit the most are the ones that they rail against, big business and corporations. But regardless, when you have a dramatic increase in immigration, it's going to add to the demand for housing. People working from home more and years of underbuilding have added to this. But again, we have to build, we have to make changes that make sense. But again, if you're adding millions and millions of people to the economy every single year, it's going to affect things. It's going to drive interest rates up, and it's going to continue to force housing costs to go up and up. So traditionally, housing is the most interest rate sensitive sector of the economy. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing it be sensitive because we have other factors going on that are taking traditional metrics or traditional rules. If housing goes up, the prices go down, etc. That's not happening because of other factors, mainly increase in demand. And then one of the things they're talking about is when housing leases for people that are renting, they are ticking back up. And it usually takes a year for that to translate because when a lease expires, that's when the new leases come into effect, and we are seeing that those are going up. So we're running out of time right now, and we're going to jump to the next article. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it all, but again, talking about some of the costs out there that might eventually affect prices, but it hurts people more than anything else. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. And we've got a quick article here by Bloomberg. This kind of runs counter to what we're talking about, but again, highlights the problems going on with housing. Again, you have property values that have skyrocketed. They're still going up. Property taxes are going through the roof. So again, we've talked a lot about how states across the country have tried to massage that, to deal with that. And some of the problems going with this, and this, Bloomberg article talks about warning signals are flashing for homeowners in Texas and Florida. It's not just there, though. It's across the country where you have property taxes and insurance costs spiking. And as a result, people can't afford their homes, and they're filing for foreclosure, or they're abandoning the market altogether and just leaving the entire area. So again, I'm I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It is a developing issue. I have a sister who was living in Austin, Texas, and their property taxes spiked till they're paying over $1,000 a month, and just property taxes and insurance. And so they just bought a fairly newer home. They have a large family, and it's just broke their back. So her husband makes good money, but again, it was just too much, and so they left Texas altogether for moved to Alabama, which is much cheaper. Got a lot more bang for the buck with the housing, and he can work remotely. So watch out for this. This is why I've been talking about property tax laws and changes happening throughout the country, because it is a real issue affecting people all across the country. I want to wrap up the news with an article. This is something we have been talking about. If you don't know who John Stossel is, you should. And, again, like I said, we should pay attention to things on the right and the left. And this is from an opinion piece at townhall.com, which definitely leans, I wouldn't say it leans right, it's absolutely from the more conservative perspective. But John Stossel is a free market guy. He writes prolifically, so he writes all the time. And he is very, he doesn't hold back at all. So his title of this article is Minimum Wage Folly, and we're going to jump right to it. Talking about California imposing dumb wage laws. Now, I want to be fair to California, but here I really can't be. I mean, it's one thing to increase some wages where it makes sense, but picking and choosing throughout the economy, I mean, this is really piecemeal legislation. Look, we're going to stand for fast food workers. Oh, we're going to stand for healthcare workers. And now they're scrambling to reverse. Yesterday I talked about how they're scrambling to reverse increasing healthcare wages to $25 an hour. You want to talk about adding fuel to the fire for inflation? Most people in the healthcare industry that are not making $25 an hour are just stepping into it. These aren't the nurses. These aren't the doctors. A lot of people working in those hospitals are making really good money. If you want to make good money, go start getting an education and work in a hospital, work in healthcare. There's plenty of money there. But like any place, you're going to have the receptionists, you're going to have the assistants that are just starting out. And no, they're not going to start off making 70, 80 grand. If you take a $25 an hour wage and that is $50,000 a year, $51,000 a year before taxes for at $25 an hour. So it was so bad that Gavin Newsom, they're reversing course. They're doing whatever they can to stop it. It's supposed to go into first into effect on Saturday, on June 1st. But the state of California can't afford it. So if the state of California can't afford that minimum wage increase, why do they think private businesses can, or it's not just going to be passed on and hurt workers? So he focuses on the fast food workers of $20 an hour. And the problem is people across the economy are having to match it because all their employees want to leave and go work in fast food. So it has not just inflationary effects for fast food, but across the California economy. When they just tinker with one part of the economy, it has effects throughout the whole economy. And unions are the main driving force for this, to get higher wages for union employees. But it's interesting that while you have wages being depressed by a huge influx of immigrants, which is normal, and it's whenever you have really high immigration, that's what happens. It's just a normal reaction to that. They're trying to artificially inflate wages in certain areas. So do they not care about the farm workers? Do they not care about the people that are working under the table? Um, as a Spanish speaker, I've helped hundreds of Latinos, and immigrants. And while I have my opinions on the border, the people here, many of them, they're just hardworking. They're trying to work within the system and provide for their families. And because they're outside the system, they get hurt. When they get hit with wage garnishments and bank levies, I can't help them if they're using a false social security number, if they're working outside the system. It is a big mess, and they're the ones that get hurt the most. Or a lot of them just go back to Mexico, or they just grab a different social security number until the problem just repeats itself. So it's not just, hey, everybody win-win, higher minimum wages. There's and he makes the point here that if it's great to just raise minimum wage to $20, why don't you raise it to $30 an hour, $100 an hour? These are just numbers. So we can just print more money, and just like under the Weimar Republic in Germany, they just printed money like crazy, and then people had to carry around wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Yeah, those are some of the worst examples from just printing money and just increasing the numbers just willy-nilly. So there's always unintended consequences, and that's the point. There's no free lunch out there. There's always unintended consequences, and a lot of these I've already talked about. First, people lose jobs. Honestly, my own sons coming out of high school, and they've worked. Some of them, they're hard workers. I wouldn't pay them $20 an hour. It's just, it's tough for businesses to swallow that. And the main thing is, why would they hire people? Because of this, you have restaurants closing. You have other businesses now being forced to match higher wages that are going to be closing. And so you have fewer jobs overall. Pollo Loco, across the board, cut employee hours by 10%. And you've got a link to a whole nother article. If you just jump to this from the Hillary Institute, 10,000 jobs estimated lost already because of that. Last fall in January, they cut 9,500 jobs, and the people there, again, it's just fewer jobs available, and why would they hire certain positions? So Pizza Hut and other pretty much pizza places across California, they just laid off all of their delivery drivers. It's not necessary. They got hit with another tax just for delivery drivers, and that they have to pay them when they're going around and getting tips. They have to pay them more. So they just laid them all off, and they changed their service. So now you can still get pizza delivered, but you have to go through Grubhub. You have to do a different service. You can't order it directly from the pizza place, which is lost profit, which means fewer jobs. Now, automation is going to continue to chip away at that. McDonald's, Chipotle, some of your biggest companies are the ones that can automate the fastest. So again, making burrito bowls, hamburgers, and he points out that even see not acknowledged, that they're replacing fast food workers with kiosks. You see it every time you go up into McDonald's, and prices going up. Fast food is no longer cheap food. It is expensive, relatively fast food, but across the country, even here, it's gone up, and it's going up more dramatically in California. Starbucks prices have increased 15%, 8% at Chipotle. But again, one of the worst things for the economy is fewer jobs, fewer opportunities for people trying to get into the job market, trying to get experience. And again, we see this in Seattle, when they artificially just increase minimum wages, they pick a number and say, hey, let's go here. Quite a few of these people look at her as their chances of getting a job. She already worked at a place, but had her hours cut. She works at fast food work, but got her hours cut because she's younger. She's lower on the totem pole, less experience. And so they're just going to cut her. And these are people that he knew and worked with. But again, the government just sticking their fingers in the instead of actually making real solutions, increase productivity and producing more goods and producing services instead of improving the situation. When they come in and like, we'll just mess with it here. It doesn't actually help with supply, doesn't help with the demand of products. All it does is increase wages across the board. So again, I think wise politicians, I know that sounds like an oxymoron, should be focused on actually improving the economy. They should be providing incentives to businesses to grow, to hire, put more people to work, and providing skilled labor, skilled labor jobs where people can work their way into those positions. That should be ideal. So one of the big things that we've cut and lost in high schools are trade jobs. Again, we have an excellent high school where my kids go to school, but they're just as guilty of pushing everybody to go to college. Well, one last thing, article that I want to share, and this is an important one and I'm taking more time than I wanted to, but this is all about veterans. Now, this comes from AMP America. I'm not familiar with this group, but so I looked them up a little bit. This is actually a progressive group. They definitely lean left, but I really like this article. This is opinion piece, but it's talking about what's happening with VA choice. So when you had the PACT Act first introduced by the Obama administration, when you had a huge scandal at the Phoenix VA. This is where veterans were literally dying on waiting lists. Service to veterans was atrocious, but yet they're handing out $10 million in bonus. They handed out over $10 million in bonuses to executives, to administrators, while veterans were dying. Through lack of care, through huge waiting lists. Again, it's the typical government service. Has the VA gotten better? Yes, in some ways, but now they're reversing course. So again, the author here, I think the author's name is at the end of the article, talks about returning from Afghanistan, trying to get an appointment, and we're told 2 months is too short of a notice. You have to call even later. I myself, as a veteran, I've called to set up an appointment. It was over a month ago, and I have to call the VA back and bug them because they didn't respond. So I'm having the same troubles, even getting an appointment today, getting care, and there's plenty of times I've gone outside the VA to get care just because it's too big of a pain to try to get care through the VA. Community care access rights were a huge thing. It started with the Choice Act in 2014 and then strengthened in 2018 by President Trump. So Obama started it, Trump expanded it, and it prioritized veterans' healthcare access. So that meant that veterans, if you can't get the care that you want or need directly from the VA in a timely manner, they had to refer you out in the community and get taken care of. But with the 2020 election, they reversed course. Delaying care, denying community care access for veterans, and they're trying to they're pushing its care providers and hospitals to rescind or get rid of access community care. And these are people that have been receiving effective care for years, and the VA is pushing back. Again, it shouldn't be political. We should actually take care of our veterans, which is why this upsets me the most. And not only do veterans get frustrated and just commit suicide, many of them are dying waiting for it. So the VA was overwhelmed by all the claims, and rather than improving their services, they're even sending them to the other side of the country for care rather than giving them help where they are. So again, interesting article here from a progressive side, but again, very concerned about how the government is treating its veterans. And unfortunately, this is flying on the radar. Not enough people are talking about it and taking care of and prioritizing veteran care. And it shouldn't be it should be a bipartisan issue. Unfortunately, too often it's not. So I took a little too much time, more time than I wanted, rather than talking about the topic of the day. So that just really hits home when you have the VA reversing course, reversing years of progress. Like I said, through the Obama and Trump administrations, both improved access, and now in the current administration is reversing course on that. I see this all the time where people get incorrect W-2s, double W-2s, so they get the same income reported twice. I've seen that quite a few times. People get issued 1099s that are incorrect. So somebody, you never worked at a place. I've seen this happen in a divorce where a husband will issue a fraudulent 1099 to have a business, and they'll write that off. Hey, here's $100,000 to my spouse. I paid them, but didn't in actuality pay them. They never saw the money, and that's a great way not a great way. That's a pretty nasty way of hurting your ex on the way out the door. There are ways to fight this. You should be fighting these things. And the best way to do, first of all, I'm going to mention this as we head into another break here. The best way to fight is to report it for what it is, fraud. So we'll come back in a sec. Welcome back, everybody. So really hammering home about 1099s, W-2s that you receive that are incorrect. There's plenty of ways that this happens. Usually it's by error or by mistake, or sometimes it's done fraudulently. So the best way to deal with this is to correct it right away. Do not wait. The moment that you find that there's an issue, go to your employer, whoever issued the 1099, whoever sent you the double W-2, and get them to correct it. They can correct it. The sooner you go and you address this, the better. The other option is so if they can correct the W-2, then it has to go through the IRS process, get processed, and once it goes through their reporting, which is a long process, there's no way to, it takes quite a while for them to receive an amended or corrected W-2, for them to process that or amended or corrected 1099, and then adjust your transcripts and your records showing that, look, this was now corrected. That is the ideal way to handle this. Now, if your employer is uncooperative or they're just not willing to do it, HR departments ironically don't want to do this. They don't do it very often, even if it's their mistake or they made a correction and then messed up the correction. I've seen that happen as well. You have to be the fly in the ointment. You have to be the bee buzzing in the ear. You have to be on top of them to make sure it's done and done correctly. Otherwise, you're the one that's going to pay come tax time. So if you can get the original source to correct the 1099, correct the error, that's ideal. If you can't get them to correct it, the longer, more time has passed, the less likely they are to correct it. And getting a hold of someone to actually correct it is half the problem. And so you need to get in there, you need to hammer them. The problem is when it's a former employer, they're less likely to actually make that correction. So what do you do if they refuse to make those corrections and address that issue? Report it for fraud. So you file with the IRS, and again, this means it's going to take years, but you want to produce your bank statements showing that, one, you never received the money, two, you can, if you have a W-2, to show that this is the total amount you earned and that this is just a repeat. They issued another W-2 for the same wages. Again, that's happened from the same EIN. But your bank statement showing that what you actually received from the year is very important. And sometimes it's not easy to go back and dig that information up, but it can be done. And you have to report it to the IRS and protect yourself and submit the information to go with it. And it's going to take probably a year and a half, 2 years for them to actually investigate it and make a decision on that. Now, don't just assume the IRS is going to fix it. You have to stay in constant communication with them, just like anything we do with the IRS. You have to stay on top of them, And by following up with them regularly, you can make sure that it is taken care of and addressed over time. So again, if you have any questions about this, about your particular case, give us a call, 520-485-7371. Or you can reach out to us through guardiantaxlaw.com. But what happens when they issue these 1099s? It'll be added to your income. It can double your income that's reported to the IRS. It can show much higher amounts. So that's why if you don't fight it, then you'll have to deal with it some other way. And unfortunately, sometimes we see this happen in family issues where one person is writing off a lot of expenses. Can be father and son, mother, daughter. I mean, it happens sometimes where one person is taking advantage of a family member. Now, if they do this year after year, the only way to stop it really is to file, claim fraud, that a fraud is being perpetrated on you. And the other option is, especially if they're issuing you fraudulent W-2s and 1099s, you really do need to file a claim for a fraud and report it as such. Now, if someone else has your identity or they have your information, and sometimes this happens, and this isn't as common, but I've seen it where people get a random 1099 from someone that they don't even know who this person is. Sometimes it's done in error, but to correct it, you need to file, a fraudulent case with the IRS and have them investigate it. One thing I do suggest, if you are concerned about identity theft, go in and get a PIN number for your tax return. So anybody contacting the IRS or dealing with your tax returns has to have that PIN number. It makes it harder for a representative like me to assist somebody, but it absolutely protects your case moving forward with the IRS and helps establishes a very a barrier to anybody else trying to steal your identity or mess with your tax account. And with identity fraud being as rife as it is a real problem out there. So what do you do in the meantime? You have this tax bill. Usually it's a surprise because you didn't know about the 1099s or the W-2s that were issued erroneously. So how do you address that? You have to deal directly with the IRS and set up some kind of resolution while you're waiting for this issue to be sorted out. Sometimes they'll put a hold on your case pending the resolution of the identity, the fraudulent activity. But sometimes if it takes too long, you'll need to set up either a non-collectible status or an installment agreement. And sometimes it's, depending on your financial situations, sometimes it makes more sense just to do an offer and compromise, wipe it out, and move on with your life. Believe it or not, there's many times with dealing with the government, it is easier to just, it might be a lot easier, instead of getting everything squared away, to just settle the debt, walk away, or if the debt's old enough, just let it expire and go away. It depends on the relationships you have with whoever filed this, or if there was a mistake. So again, and it depends on your tolerance for dealing with this mess as well. That's one thing when I talk to people, I say, look, this is what it's going to take. Is this something you're willing to do, or would you rather resolve this quicker in a different manner? There's some people that they come in, they just want to set up an installment agreement. They don't care if it's done erroneous. They don't care if they can qualify for, to pay less. Sometimes they just want to deal with this. If you have any, so dealing with these issues requires doing the full financial analysis, talking to a tax professional, and these are the cases that we see day in and day out on a regular basis. So if you have those questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. Reach out to us through our website at guardiantaxlaw.com, and you can always look up these shows. I've done entire shows on how to file for tax fraud and how to get that addressed. So if you have questions, you can always go to irs.gov. And real quick, I'm going to share my screen here. And part of the show is, everybody has to call me. Actually, the opposite. We like to share information. And if you just go to irs.gov, so this is what the irs.gov website looks like. I search tax fraud, and then how do you report suspected tax fraud activity? It's right there. There's information about whistleblowers for people that aren't. This is if you're working someone. If you're working for someone and you see that they're not doing things correctly, you can report it to the IRS. There are awards available, but you have to follow under very particular criteria for that. But in your particular case, it's Form 3949A. So there's all kinds of information, false or altered documents, 1099s, W-2s, in particular what we're talking about. Organized crime, failure to withhold. I do get questions where an employer is paying you but not paying your taxes. If you suspect that, you need to report it and look for another job. So, and then you have for taxpayer abuse, Form 14242. They do eventually get to these. They do eventually address these issues. It just takes time. But don't be afraid to look for help. Again, we have the forms. We can refer you directly to these forms. For taxpayer abuse, fraudulent IRS emails and websites, you can report that directly to the IRS. Now, a lot of people ask, why do that if the damage is already done? It absolutely helps build a database. It helps the IRS share information, helpful information. So just yesterday, someone had called in and they were dealing with the crypto scam. And it's a very typical thing where He had invested money, but he was playing with different dark web sources or investment sites, and he needed to take some money out. So when he went to take the money out, that's what they do the scam, and they said, look, you need to pay us $120,000 is what they asked for. He must have had a lot more invested than that to get your money. The sad truth is he's gonna lose the whole shebang. Whatever he invested, if he invested $500,000 and then he wanted to pull out just some money or the whole amount, and they said, look, you can't pull it out until you pay the taxes. Huge scam. And the sad truth is he's going to lose his whole investment. The worst thing you can do is give them more money. So by reporting, not only can the IRS try to investigate them, but they can also warn other people. So this is something I've seen multiple times. The IRS has posted about it. And so, again, they get the word out to tax preparers, and they can help other people avoid these kinds of scams as well. So don't be afraid to report it. Don't be afraid to address these issues. But whenever you have a consultation with a tax attorney, it's confidential. If you're afraid that someone's going to get in trouble, we'll sit down and walk through the pros and cons of each option with you and decide the best way to move forward for you and to make these thorny, difficult issues easier for you and your family. I highly recommend using irs.gov to get information. Take it with a grain of salt, though, but again, they do have a lot of excellent information there that can definitely help you navigate your tax situation and get some information. But what I love when people do their homework. They go online, they read some articles, they have gone to irs.gov, and then they give us a call. And you can call us anytime. You don't have to do your own research before you give us a call. But when people have an idea of what's out there, I can very quickly clarify what's incorrect. And sometimes it's an idea that they just understood a little differently than how it's applied by the IRS. So again, I highly encourage people to get informed, do some research, find some good information, and then call a tax professional and get steered in the right direction. Just yesterday, I had someone, it was a small case, but they were getting hit with penalties and interest every single year, and they didn't understand why, and they were furious. Why is this happening? And it was getting worse as interest rates were going up. What was their problem? Estimated tax payments. I talked at length about that yesterday. So we were able to get that squared away for them, get that figured out without costing her a penny. Just asked for an online referral as we provided a service for her. Well, I was able to clear that up in about 20 minutes. So again, don't be afraid to reach out and protect yourself. If you do have scams, if you do have concerns out there, give us a call at 520-485-7371. Look us up at guardiantaxlaw.com. There's a button right there for our YouTube videos that have already been posted. And I hope you have a great day. And again, as we get ready for another weekend, enjoy, and we go into the summer, enjoy your summer. And there's no reason to carry these IRS burdens and the stress that goes with them. So part of the idea behind Taxes Made Easy is giving people peace of mind, letting them de-stress, decompress. Are there times to be worried and to be concerned? Absolutely. But most of the time, people are afraid they're going to go to jail, their housing, and everything's going to implode. You don't need to freak out. Give us a call. We'll straighten things out and again, make a very scary, dangerous situation easy for you. And that's our whole goal. That's what we do. So again, have a great day and wish you the best of luck out there as you tackle and get prepared. Not only tackle past issues, but get prepared for your financial success moving forward. And that's our whole goal here at Guardian Tax Law.